Oh my God. Thank you for coming, guys. We are live. HLTV Confirmed is happening. You guys are here. Thank you for being part of my community. I love it. Subscribe, like, follow the channel. Get over there to my YouTube, the Instagram, everything. This is such an amazing community. You guys are fantastic. Thank you. Fuck all that shit, all right? We're going to put all that noise behind us because we're back. I'm here to talk shit. I'm here to swear a lot. I know you guys don't like it. You say it in the comments. Episode 16 of HLTV Confirmed. You can see all the other faces here. We'll introduce them in a second. But we need to talk about what we're covering in today's episode. We got COVID. We're talking about what that's done to the Counter-Strike scene. We've had some updates that have been going on. We've obviously got daps here. We're going to be talking to him about Gen.G, obviously about Flashpoint, what's been happening over there, how North American Counter-Strike is, and all that bullshit. So first of all, let's get into this. Prof, what is your current surroundings? How's life changed?
Like honestly, not that much. I have to cook more, which is fine. I have to clean more, have to avoid my mom, so she can't clean stuff for me. That sucks. Other than that, all good.
Okay. Striker, has anything really? I know that you were self-quarantining yourself for a little while there. Are you still doing any of that
stuff? You mean for like the last 25 years or something?
No, we were talking a while ago, and you said that you were in your room when I was last on the show, which was forever ago.
Yeah, but I mean that's my life. Like I said, it's like
same
the last 20 years or something. So that's fine.
All right, well, Lucas is here, so say hi to Lucas. He's a producer for those of you who don't come to the show. He's here still, so that's good. But most importantly, we have Daps. Daps, hello. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, man?
Yeah, I'm all right. This is fine. You obviously flew home from Flashpoint and all that kind of stuff. Was that a weird transition flying back during that time, or was everything still cool?
It was really weird because I've never been to LAX and there was no one there before. So
okay, that was quite nice.
That was definitely really weird. And the few people that were there were coughing. So
oh, okay. Well, that's
pretty
great.
Fun.
That's great. Everyone's having a good time with the whole washing their hands and all that kind of nonsense. Now we have a new intro. Apparently, Lucas is going to roll this one before we get into the questions, and we're getting into the hot seat with Daps. All right, so I guess we're going to get sponsored by a chair company at some point because that was a really well made intro. Daps, I'm gonna kick this straight off. I kind of warned you, but I didn't warn you at all. I just said you're probably going to avoid the question. When Stan came in to replace you, did you know that the personalities in that team weren't going to work out because the other guys are all quiet and nerdy and stuff, or did you think that it was going to pan out for him?
It's kind of hard to say because I mean I played with Stan in like 2016. On Conquest and Optics. I actually played with Stan for like a year and a bit. But I know, just talking to Stan recently, he's definitely changed for the better, I'd say. Like, I enjoyed talking to him, even when I was like at Pro League in France with them. Like, I don't really have any problems with Stan. So I couldn't really predict it, I'd say. I think it's just, I don't necessarily know if it's anything, like I know some like things, but I know if you're talking about like the replacement about like Chet, then it's kind of like I think they're just doing that to sort of like they're doing that before a roster change happens. It's sort of like let's see if this lineup can win one more event before we have to make like a change to the actual lineup.
Okay. While we're talking about that, when you had that whole Pro League situation going on, because I was there and I could see like the weird dynamic, because when we walked around that area, it was like a retirement village, right? So all the boys would be out, they would be practicing together and shit, and you'd kind of be tagged in there as that sixth man. I can only imagine, and I would love you to give us any of your feelings from that. That must have been such a shitty fucking thing to have to go through.
It was shitty, but I mean, I also had the choice to go or not, and I prefer to like do well at the tournament and win some free money than not go to it. To be honest, so I mean,
that's definitely ringing true with Chad. He definitely likes that approach.
Yeah, like there's two sides to it. I could have just like made Chet play, which would have been hilarious at the same rate, because he always tries to avoid playing, and he would have done horrible, but
and has successfully done so far.
Yeah, so. I mean, we did pretty well at that event. I think we got top 4, so
yeah, you did.
It wasn't too bad.
How do you feel about like we'll get into the questions that profs to get us in the direction soon. We'll head that way. But how do you feel about these teams? Like Mad Lions is another one, right? Who just replaced their in-game leader. Now, in your case, they replaced an in-game leader with another in-game leader. But we've obviously got Ents who fucked up. Mad Lions just replaced. They replaced HUNDEN with Asilian, right? So I guess Asilian is kind of a pseudo in-game leader in that way. He's been doing it for a couple of years now. But do you like have a feeling when you see those moves go down that they're not going to work? Because that's what it is like from the pundit side. When we're sitting behind the desk and we see a team that's like on the up and up and they take out their in-game leader, they automatically like turn into a villain for a lot of us on this. Like, we don't really give a fuck, but it's like you can see if it comes crumbling down, it's their own mistake.
It's really hard to say because IGLs obviously either get most of the credit or get all of the blame in a lot of scenarios, even when it probably isn't the case. And then also, IGLs are more likely to be replaced because they're generally going to have more opinions and butt heads with people. So in the Ents case, I assume it was probably aleksib and Alu who probably butt heads, and Alu might have had more sway on the team than aleksib did. That potentially is what happened. Like there are a lot of players over the years where they're just sort of like those average players on teams where like they'll never get cut, but they'll never get picked up by someone better because they don't really have opinions. They sort of just go with the flow and like they sort of just let things happen. So I assume aleksib had some opinions that they didn't agree with, and eventually like the power shift happened where they agreed with one side than the other.
Yeah, it tends to be the way, right? I'm sure we've all been on a bunch of those fucking conversations in our time. Now, let's get into the direction of maybe a more positive light here. Talking about the Gen.G offer, how that all kind of came about, and then obviously BnTeT coming on into this whole thing. Can you kind of package that up for everybody at home for us?
Yeah, I mean, we were looking at NA players before because we didn't even think BnTeT was a possibility, and then we heard a rumor that he was possible to get because I knew he wasn't possible a long time ago when we were trying to get him for NRG.
Yeah, I know Renegades tried to get him as well, but there was some like apparently visa issues or some shit like that.
A lot of people tried to get him over the years. So finally Tyloo was like interested in selling him or whatever happened there, and I mean it's a no-brainer. Like there's no reason not to get him essentially.
Okay,
that's pretty much how it happened.
All right. So other than that, like the no-brainer to get him kind of thing, Gen.G as an organization isn't something that a lot of Counter-Strike fans are probably very familiar with, right? It's not a name that's synonymous with Counter-Strike. So that whole situation as itself, was that something that was a shock to you guys, or did you know that they were out there sniffing for teams? Like, what was going on with that?
We heard rumors that there was when I got cut from NRG, there was a bunch of orgs I talked to, and then there was a bunch of orgs that wanted to talk to me, but I ended up signing with Cloud9 before they talked to me. So I knew there was a ton of orgs that have always wanted to get into Counter-Strike, but they are only waiting to either get like tier 1 players or tier 1 teams, or teams that they think can become tier 1. So there are still a lot of orgs on the sidelines, just like kind of waiting to get in. They just sort of don't want to take like just some average team. So I did hear their name prior to, so I wasn't that surprised. I was surprised at how fast it happened because it literally happened overnight pretty much.
Do you think it had a lot to do with like the history of Cloud9 and considering like how many players they changed? Like, you know, nothing really worked for them for the past 2 years or something. Do you think that had a lot to do with it?
Well, like, yeah, the Cloud9 situation, they're just like, we wanted to go a different route with the project, and it just seemed better for both parties that, you know, they just get a fresh start and then we sort of get our fresh start, and it just kind of worked out because they were in Flashpoint, or Gen.G was, and a bunch of Flashpoint teams needed a team, so it kind of worked out in the end because Cloud9 in a way like helped Gen.G like get into the space, and Cloud9 ended up getting a pretty decent lineup for whatever price they got them for. So I think it just all worked out in the end pretty well.
So basically it's all a conspiracy that Cloud9 sold a team just to get Gen.G into Flashpoint, because obviously Cloud9 are a big org behind Flashpoint with MIBR.
I don't know, like it was pretty mutual, I'd say.
Can someone actually explain this to me? So Cloud9 sell their team, which is Gen.G, which is more or less a better team than the Cloud9 team they have right now, right? I think we can agree on that. They sell them to Gen.G, but then also invest, I guess, to get like a cheaper team, which is the actual Cloud9 team today. But they also invest additional money into the league, like a lot of money, and they're proud to say they have a lot of money. So like, how does this all add up? Like for me, it doesn't really make any sense.
Well, you have to think about it. Like, at what point Gen.G switched, right? They basically just had 3 players at that point when they went from Cloud9 to Gen.G, and then they got the additional couple, right? So
that is true. That is true. But still, it kind of doesn't make sense to me from the Cloud9 perspective. But what can you say?
Well, there's a lot of shit that's happening lately that doesn't make too much sense, and I think that's probably just the way things will stay for a while until we pass the statute of limitations, and then we can all come out and talk about the shit. This tends to be the way that stuff goes. But Daps, another part of this journey or this story that interests me is obviously you guys have ImAPet there as your coach, right? Now, he's an Australian bloke. For those people who aren't too familiar with him, he coached Order a couple years ago. He was the assistant coach under James IRL for Cloud9, right? And then now he's over there with you guys, and he's the head coach. Do you want to give us a bit of insight on him? Because learning about coaches is something that's really difficult to do from our side of things. We never really get to, have too much see what their input is within a team.
Yeah, I would say he has a lot of characteristics that Chet had when I first got him. Obviously, Chet had coached like CLG.
It sounds like you start a Pokemon, mate. What do you mean you first got him?
Well, he's more like on the analytical side, right?
Okay.
Like that's sort of the compare. Like I usually categorize coaches to like hype man coaches and then more analytical coaches, and then there's some coaches who just do both really well. So I'd say right now ImAPet is really strong on like the analytical side, like bringing like ideas he wants to implement, and then just we have a lot of ideas on the team, so like we're just trying to like sift through and make sure everyone's getting their piece in and like figuring out how like what works with the team and what doesn't. And then obviously like he coached Order for a little bit and he was analyst for Cloud9 for a little bit, so I think he's like still working on the more hype authority side of things, I'd say. But he's a young coach, so that just comes with time and just like perfecting his craft, I'd say.
Is he doing it from Australia?
No. He's in LA.
Okay.
So he was in LA for Flashpoint.
Oh, that's right. Fuck, I completely forgot about there was the whole LAN portion before everything kind of got fucked up, wasn't there? Okay.
Not for a long time.
Yeah, well, look, the weeks have flown by. I don't know about you guys. I know it feels slow, but it feels quick and slow at the same time. But, okay, so speaking of quick and slow, let's go forward to Ahaheim. So you guys actually went over there to that DreamHack event and had a lot of success very early, which I think was surprising to...
I have to quote Striker on this. I don't remember the actual quote, but it was like, anyone can win this event except Gen.G. Like,
basically,
no way.
My reasoning was nobody wins their first LAN together, which is kind of true. Like, as far as I remember, like nobody really wins their first LAN together. So that's what my reasoning was, not just like because you guys were shit or anything.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a question.
The question, the direction is that event basically for you guys. You weren't going in expecting to win it, right?
No, not at all. Because the boot camp was really, really good for us that we had before Ahaheim, and I essentially, like, the start of the team was more so just everything I wanted to add to the team, and just like the base level CS, like just like basics, like how do you split sites, how do you like just basic things, just making sure like the foundation's really good. And we won the LAN off of that, and I think there was some matches we probably should have lost, but we did show like some mental resilience, like it coming back against Ends. I think we lost like both pistols and we're down 13-5 or whatever. Like, they technically should win that match, but we did a good job not like breaking down and falling apart when it seemed pretty dire. So I'd say that LAN was like really character building, just because we didn't really win any matches cleanly except like one map versus Furia in the final. But I would like our expectations were just to get it at groups and just see where we're at after the boot camp, essentially.
Okay. So I think that boot camp that you guys had in Europe, I have a question, because Som is somebody in your team who seems to be playing fantastically well, right? And he's a kid who, from a distance, I'd monitor playing within the pug realms and doing whatever he does and look and go, oh yeah, that's just but he didn't ever like seem like he would be one of these superstar players, right? For you guys, some of the numbers he puts up every now and again seem to be like very good numbers. So do you think that whole boot camp in Europe type of thing really helped fast track him as an individual?
Yeah, I think the boot camp gave us a ton of confidence because we were playing like all the best teams in the world, and we were either beating them or playing them really close. We very rarely at the boot camp just got obliterated by just a team, like maybe some like random Russian team would destroy us, but that's expected in scrims. But other than that, like it was a really productive boot camp, and we learned a lot from it, and we did everything, like we did all the baseline things correctly, and all the fundamentals were there. And I'd say right now why we're struggling more is because we're like trying to expand and like add more things, but I think we've sort of forgotten a lot of the things from the boot camp, and I think also the transition to online kind of hurt us a little bit. Bad muted? I can't hear.
Yeah, he is. I think he just got muted.
All right, we fixed it. Look, all right, I'm an idiot. We've established that over many years. So that was a good segue to kind of go into, I guess, current day. We'll come back a little bit and talk more about building a team. But in terms of the North American side of things, a lot of people don't realize the caliber of practice, right? And this goes. It's more so when I was still living and competing within North America, which was I guess I finished in the middle of 2016. And there's a big disparity, right? When you go over to Europe, we always talk about this. You get punished a lot more. You can't make the same mistakes. The meta's different. All that same shit. But now in North America, because you have had more Flashpoint teams there, and Liquids, the 100 Thieves, the EGs of the world, they can't travel around. What's kind of the practice been like that? Has it gone in more of a direction that I don't want to say mimicking Europe, there's just not enough teams, as player base isn't as big, but are you guys still doing the starting practice with scrims at 4, 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the afternoon, or is it more like a daytime schedule? What are we looking at? How's North America kind of shaping up?
I'd say it definitely is trickier just because of time zones if you're not all in one location, but I'd say it's definitely less. Like you generally start practice at 12 PST, which is 3 East, and then you go for about like 7-8 hours. I'd say there's probably like 2 or 3 less hours in the day because you just can't. There's not enough scrims to get. So
yeah, that was a problem we used to have as well. You didn't want to play the same teams all the time because you had to play them in qualifiers. There's all that kind of bullshit going. So then, in terms of like staying match ready, or because obviously at one point the floodgates will open and we will get to travel again and we will get to play LAN events again against the best teams in the world. Do you think? Because this is like actually. This is probably in the coronavirus discussion. Let's leave this. I'll bring it up. I'm going to write a note somewhere.
Well, I was just going to ask about, like, since you guys don't really have that many scrims, like, do you just fill it with theory, or do you just like go on a map alone, or how do you really fill that time that you have on top?
We usually start with like 2 hours of theory or server time, and then if we really want to talk about something that happened in like 2 of the scrims after the theory, we use part of our break to talk about it. Yeah, it's usually the schedule is usually like 2 hours, 4 scrims, then 2 scrims, break, 2 scrims, and then you get lucky, you might get 5 scrims. It's very rare you get 6 scrims in one day.
Okay.
In NA at least.
Okay, so let's return to the whole building of a team situation, because Prof has an excerpt here. I'm assuming this is from a HLTV.org interview, Prof. I'm guessing. Yeah. Is that where the quote's from?
It was just before they signed for Gen.G, obviously. He was talking about the Cloud9 team that then went to Gen.G, like saying that this is the last time you build a roster or lineup, something like that. So does that kind of lead to you already thinking, like some people would say that you're already thinking about retirement or another role in the scene, or how do you really approach this as your, let's say, last building of a team?
Well, part of it is like potentially thinking about like stopping playing, but I wouldn't say that's like the main driver. The main point is from that is building teams is really tough, especially starting from scratch. That's why I was so adamant about continuing to play with Kusta and Tim, just because on Gen.G, just because like at least I keep part of the core, and all the failure on Cloud9 wasn't a waste, because like you learn a lot from failing and like losing matches. And if I just start fresh again, then you have to do that again, and then it's just a waste of time essentially. So part of it is like building teams is really tough. You're not always going to get the right mixtures of people, as you saw in Cloud9, and it's just like joining a team like where everything's just set for you, and you have like all these players, and there's like even Stan joining NRG, like that's a blessing. Like I would love to just be Stan got a really good offer, and of course he's gonna take it. Like, you're joining a team that's winning. Like, there's a set core that's been together for years. Like, you don't have to like worry about much. You just come in and like that's like a beautiful thing. So I think that's why I said it, because like building teams is like a long process.
There's a question from this. It's on the tip of my brain. 1 second, it's coming. Okay, so in terms of like when you go into these new projects, obviously this one here is going to be fresher in your mind. But when you go into these newer projects, what baseline are you having to start with here? Because is it still the sense of, all right, guys, we need to go around the map and make sure we don't have 7 different names for the same position? Like, are you starting that basic, or like what's your starting point when you walk into these situations?
Yeah, I mean, especially with BnTeT, like we had to, like we started off with like before he even came over, we made pictures of maps with all the spot callouts for him, so he could like at least learn like what NA callouts are. He knew some from like watching streams and stuff, but even still, like we have some troubles sometimes. Like, it's obviously a lot for him because he's completely changing like how you communicate, and sometimes it's hard for him to think like on the fly like what the name of that spot is or whatever, but he's doing a pretty good job like fitting into that.
Okay, because I always wonder, right? I play Counter-Strike upstairs with my colleagues, and I feel like I have to fucking sit them down sometimes and go, all right, guys, this is the name of the place. This is how we throw a grenade. As long as you don't have to start there, mate, you're off to a bit of a flyer. Now, speaking of starts, Flashpoint, obviously that started. You guys are part of that. Do you want to give us your experience with the event, right? Because you've obviously attended a lot of tournaments through the time. This is meant to be a whole new thing, right? So I guess we can start with the LAN portion and how that all kind of unfolded. How did you find that experience? And then we'll evolve into the online kind of discussion there. So how did things all kick off with Flashpoint? Were you happy?
I thought it was pretty interesting. I like Monty a lot. I think he does a pretty good job. He seems pretty level-headed and like has good vision for like what a good event should be. I thought a lot of like the graphics they did, and like at least from like my perspective, and they've made it pretty clear, like they're trying to like show the personality of players more, which is something that gets left behind sometimes. So even though some people felt they were forcing it, I feel like it's good that they're trying to at least like figure out who's like able to banter, who's not, then you sort of like build up from that. But of course they weren't really able to do it because it went online only. In terms of the format, like I think the format was interesting and cool. I still think that league should like, at least in a league, you should play pretty much everyone in the league, because there are like chances you get bad groups potentially with the format they had. Like I think it was pretty balanced here, but like in the future maybe it could be a thing where you get like really hard groups both phases, and then you end up not playing like 4 or 5 teams you could easily beat. Would be like a risk of that system. So, but overall, like I didn't have any complaints. Like it was pretty interesting.
When you get 2 groups here, so it's like you basically play at least like half the teams there. So it's like even more, actually 6 teams.
I mean, you could get like similar groups both times.
Yeah, we played
you could
MIBR
technically get the
3
same
times.
groups.
Oh yeah, that's true. Actually, you guys got MIBR in both cases, but still, like it's not just like one 4-team group that determines your fate.
Yeah, I just said it because like I know there's teams in other groups. Like we obviously like scraped by, and like with how we're playing, I'll take a 5th, 6th to be honest. But like there's teams we were definitely way more comfortable playing against, and we just never got to play them. But yeah, it's not a huge deal. Like,
okay,
I felt like overall like Flashpoint had a lot of good ideas and good intentions, and
I like the bar stuff they were doing after. I don't know. I didn't like. Look, I'm going to be honest. I didn't get to watch any of the games because I was working every day for the last month. So I didn't get to watch any of the stuff they were really putting out, any stuff that really ended up on Reddit or post game bits and pieces. So Prof or Striker, either of you can take this. Do you want to do a quick, because we're going to move forward here. Either of you do a quick little summary of what's going on over there within that Flashpoint scenario, like the teams, the Counter-Strike. Because I honestly haven't kept up with any of it. So if you can help me out here, maybe we can help them out.
Just to catch you up on where we are, it's just down to 3 teams, right? And Havo, I guess, is the biggest one that we should highlight as a big surprise, because it might be our Mad Lions. I think everybody saw coming to like a top 4 at least, as 2 of the top 4 teams anyway. And Havo definitely weren't one of those teams that we expected up there. So that's definitely a big surprise. And then that's at least from my side. I don't know, how about you, Prof?
Yeah, definitely them. I think more the rest of the teams are more or less what was expected, considering Dignitas didn't have Halzerk, so they played with Guardian. Of course, they're not going to be amazing. Then Chaos as well had a bunch of stand-ins, changes, stuff like that. Envy had a stand-in, then they played with the full roster at the end. Didn't really.
FPX played with 2 different teams.
They played with 2 different teams, yeah. So when you take all in that into account, yeah, I think MIBR and Mad Lions at the top makes sense. Even though the loss of Mad Lions to MIBR at the end is kind of surprising. Like MIBR kind of pulled out some good form here at the end, even after they switched to the like like the nerfed Krieg and stuff like that, and they were one of the teams that used it a lot.
They're not playing on the old patch.
Before the playoffs, they updated to the patch, which makes sense because they started literally the playoffs the day after the patch or something like that, and the playoffs last 2 weeks. So it kind of made sense to switch then instead of waiting for 2 more weeks. And everyone hates the Krieg apparently, so.
Yeah, well, look, it was a gun that was around and now it's dead. So Valve are good at that shit, but I'm sure we're going to get to talk about it a little bit more. So we're going to keep this one moving. We're going to move across now to talk about our current situation. That every single person, every single human being in the entire world right now finds himself in. This is the coronavirus scenario, COVID-19, all that kind of shit. Now, I don't want to sit here and tell you kids to wear masks and wash your hands and not go outside and do all that kind of stuff, because you've heard that constantly. So I hope you're all doing that. I hope you're doing the right thing. I hope you're all looking after yourselves and your family members and your loved ones, and you're learning how to do all those fun bits and pieces that you've been putting off for years because you're a procrastinating motherfucker like all of us. But the reality of this is we're talking about the effects it's had on Counter-Strike. And I guess we could probably dial back to Katowice. That would be the best place to start, because coronavirus was obviously kicking off. It was happening, and Katowice back then got closed down, right, in terms of the audience. We all know that. Some of us were there. It was a pretty surreal feeling at the time. But since then, a lot of shit's happened.
I just want to say there's one guy tweeting, like, when all of that was going down, I tweeted something about Katowice, I don't know. Some guy tweeted at me like, what is this bullshit? In Italy, they're having football matches. Everything's going on like normal. Why are they closing that down?
1 week later.
Obviously not really funny, but at the same time, there is some dark humor there. Well, because you know what happened in Italy like 2 weeks after that.
But there's a lot of people who are obviously like, oh, how are they doing this? All these other sporting events are still open, all this kind of bullshit. Well, we all know what's happened post that, right? Like everything has basically been locked down. Most places experience in the world in a very similar way. People are staying indoors. People aren't going out to work, especially if you're in the service industry and all that kind of shit. Things are pretty fucked, right? Hopefully, one thing that comes of this, people might actually start being a little bit more empathetic to one another. But hey, that's just a dream. But
that's a dream, man.
For the Counter-Strike world, so everything is basically shifted online, right? I think that's the gist of all of this.
Or just straight up canceled. There's been some cases of that.
That's a good point too. So the Counter-Strike world is still continuing, but it's limping along, right? We're obviously not at 100% where we were. We're not having the LAN events, which we all know is the purest form of Counter-Strike. I don't think any single person in this world will ever try and pull the wool over your eyes and say online CS is as good as LAN, but here's what I will do. I will tell you that there is no LAN Counter-Strike right now. So if you're going to be one of those fucking dumb cunts who's going to be like, oh, it's not LAN Counter-Strike, so I'm not watching, go fuck yourself. Because guess what, ladies and gentlemen? There is no LAN CS at the moment. This is all we've got. This is the best you're going to have to fucking deal with. And until this shit either blows over or it doesn't, you won't be watching any LAN CS. So just shut the fuck up. All right. So now that we're back with all of that, has anything else really changed? It's just our lives, right? So in terms of that, let's look at this from a reporter for HLTV.org's perspective. Prof, for you, your world and your life, how has that changed? Obviously, you're at home, right?
Yeah, I mean, like most of the year you are still at home, but like at least once a month, more or less on average, we travel somewhere. We're at an event, which means not only like being at an event is not just like watching the games. Obviously, you can watch the games at home, but you don't have that like human interaction with players, with like analysts, whatever, where you get additional information, where you exchange ideas, like think more about the game, just like more intense into CS when you're at an event than compared to like watching an event from home. I think that's what anyone can agree to, even if you're watching it like a fan, if you're there in Cologne in the audience, it's going to be like, it's just going to be more intense. So I think that's a thing that I am missing right now, that you get this, like, especially now, like the next month or two, when we'll have just like so much online CS, it's just going to be like a lot and there's not going to be like a new thing, that new feel of LAN CS that you get when you go to an actual LAN. That's a thing that we have to deal with. And obviously there's like less important news, and we had to change things in terms of how we approach like interviews, what stories we run, because I think if you go on the site and you look like the last month, we posted things that usually we wouldn't post because just that there's not that much going on, of course. So you post that like tier 3 Polish team roster change and stuff like that, and then people are like who in the comments. So that is more or less like what's been going on the last month.
You haven't been to an event this year, right? I just realized.
No, I have not been to an event the whole year. Like last event was last year, like ECS or something.
That's probably a good platform. Daps, in terms of for you now, you were in LA, shit went south. You've obviously returned home, but it's been, what's it been? It's probably been a month now, right? When was the last time? Like, I'm trying to think of a way that I can like set this question out there. You don't just hit me with a reply of after I got cut from this team, right? That's not the reply I'm looking for here. The reply I'm looking for here is, as a professional Counter-Strike player, when was the last time you remember being able to sit at home for a month without having to worry about traveling, right? Can you think of like that time other than Christmas, maybe?
Fuck. That would have been...
I guess not.
That would have been when I was on NRG with like PTR and
fuck,
damn,
Ugly and stuff.
Okay,
yeah, that would have been like
2017.
Yeah, 2017, because like we weren't really going to any lands. We only made both Pro League finals. That was pretty much it, and like one DreamHack Open, I think.
Okay, so let me preface this again, because we have to do this because there's certain people who don't operate with common sense in play. With stuff that we're about to talk to about, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of travel, we all know that we're very privileged in other positions that we have in terms of either careers or as a player, or as this, whatever in this world. We all know we're very lucky. It's great. We love it. We love Counter-Strike. Everything's really cool. Traveling's lots of fun, da-da-da-da. But anything that you do in this life, if you do it for long enough, eventually it's going to be a fucking pain in the ass. And getting on airplanes and traveling and being in a different hotel room every single day of your life, that can be pretty fucking draining. Now, Daps, not having to travel like this, do you feel more relaxed, right? Like we're talking about life questions right now. Like, do you think this, like, not having to travel so much is good for you as an individual and for your Counter-Strike?
I'd say not in the situation it's in. I'd say if everything was normal, then yes, it would be nice, but I can't like do anything anyways, so I'm just like locked in a house essentially.
Okay.
Like, so I mean, I'd say yes and no. Like, obviously, it's nice not getting on a plane every 2 seconds, but I'd say it's not the best.
All right.
But like, we're lucky we have the jobs we have. Like,
for sure.
I feel for people that can't just sit on their computer and like
do a job,
so we're
only
they're
talking,
just probably going insane.
We're only talking within the context of our world, right? Like, I understand that there's people out there who are stuck at home who can't work because they have like a service industry job or some shit like that. But what I'm noticing here is our Counter-Strike world was like going at 200 kilometers an hour. We were just like nonstop. There was events. It was this shit was changing. This was cropping up. We couldn't handle, like, we didn't have time to stop and fix this. We didn't have time to stop and do this. With this time that's kind of been forced upon us, the entire Counter-Strike world, maybe not just as a player, maybe not just as an individual, like relaxing or whatever, but like as the Counter-Strike world, we've kind of like, not a hard reset button, but we've hit like a pause to reconsider everything, right? Like, we're still running online events. We've scrambled the best we can with the TOs and Valve doing the best that they can to get us in this position. But we've also kind of get a chance to look at everything and go, is this good? Is this bad? Should we continue like this? Should we change this? Like, we've been given a bit of an opportunity right now because of how quick Counter-Strike was constantly changing and updating and everything was happening. We've been given an opportunity now to look at everything and go, oh, well, maybe we should do less of this, or maybe some, like, honestly, there was a lot of Counter-Strike being played with Pro League, right? Everybody was playing each other within their group. There was best of threes, shit was going on, it was constant game CS. But one thing that I noticed from that whole month of intently watching CS was that people were putting in a shitload of work, right? Like we had interviews with players on the broadcast and we'd be like, oh, like, do you find this is good for your game or bad? No, immediately default to the answer of it's online CS. But you can clearly see the amount of work that's being put in from game to game with counter-stratting, with new moves, with all this kind of stuff. Like I just thought from a Counter-Strike quality perspective of how we were looking for online CS, it was very good. I don't know if that can be said. Like I said, I didn't watch any Flashpoint, so I'm not sure. But did you guys find watching Pro League, you thought it was good Counter-Strike?
We were just talking to Malik last week, and he was literally just talking about, who was it? Like how Astralis were prepared for like a Mouse matchup or whatever it was. I'm not sure exactly what the match was we were talking about. But yeah, I definitely remember like some of these cases where it was pretty clear that the team put in a lot of work ahead of like important playoffs matches. Maybe not so much for like the individual ones for like the league part of it or like the group stage part of it. But when it got to playoffs, when it got to crunch time, I felt like it was pretty obvious.
I'd say it varies per team. I'd say some teams definitely don't change that much between online and LAN, and then there's some teams that are clearly better on LAN than online, and then there's some teams that are clearly better online than on LAN. So
give me one name, man. we asked this like the last 5 episodes, like who is good online. No one wants to like name any team. Give me one team that's better online.
I feel like Fnatic is just good on both. Like I feel like Fnatic doesn't really like. It's obviously easy to say since they won, I think, but when I watch them play, like I don't really see them change how they play too much, and that's a good thing. I mean, they just seem confident in both environments.
Would you say Astralis suffers because of how fundamentally sound they are? Do you think that like people make less mistakes online?
Yeah, I feel like there's certain mistakes or like peaks that don't get punished as easily online, where obviously Astralis has probably accounted for most of those like random things on LAN, where they probably don't get punished by it as much. Like I don't know what the pings in Europe are better than NA, that's for sure, but
unless you're Russian, and then you're probably fucked. But everyone else,
yeah. I think like Ukraine and like Moscow is probably pinging. Depends on where they play. I'm not sure. Like depends on the matchup and everything. But it could be like 70 ping for like Germany to Moscow or Ukraine. But
even like Lock6 is playing like playable stuff, like something that you'd probably experience in NA, like from West Coast to East Coast, like the worst case scenario.
Actually thinking before the show, like daps could probably play like UK servers with the same ping he's playing in LA, Toronto to LA. It's like probably
get the
90,
same
100 ping.
I got like 90 ping to UK, I think.
Fucking hell. I couldn't even play 90 ping in my own country in Australia, so that's pretty good.
So I want to ask like daps actually, like with higher pings, how much does the game actually change? Like how many plays that you can do on LAN can you do on like online and stuff like that? Can you talk about that a bit?
It depends on who you're playing, right? Like I was very like I was like speaking about how I had 100 ping a bunch. Like obviously it's just a dumb excuse, but it's not, to be honest, because you have 100 ping and then you're playing someone that has like 80 to 100 ping, then it's not a huge deal. Like they're feeling it just as much as you are, and there's probably not that much of a disadvantage. Obviously there's peaker's advantage, so whoever's peaking probably has a better chance of killing you. But I was playing on 100 ping versus people who have 5 ping, so you literally I can't even shoot. Like on T side it didn't matter as much. Like you don't really feel it as much when you're peeking into people, because just like how the game works. And then but if you're holding an angle on CT side, it's literally impossible online if you have 100 ping, or like they just have the advantage, like no question. Like if you're a player that's played with 100 ping, you know what I'm talking about. So depending on like what teams have good ping or not, like in Europe or in NA, and then I don't know like what servers are going to be played on for the events coming up, but there is going to be some teams that probably have a little bit of an advantage. Like when we were on NRG and we literally didn't lose an online match for 2 months when we picked up Ethan, pretty much, and we were all in Vegas and we all had like 10 ping to like every server because we had like good internet. Like we had a good fiber internet in Vegas, and Vegas is pretty centrally located between the servers you'd play on normally. And we definitely had a huge advantage online because we were playing teams that had like 50 to 70 ping a lot of the time, and we all had like 10 to 20. And then it was just a clear advantage anytime we played teams.
Yeah, we had Stan on one of the post game interviews that we were doing on Pro League, and shying away from talking about online is kind of pointless, right? Because as we said before, it's the only thing that we can talk about. And he was like, yeah, he was playing with higher ping from Canada and his teammates. He was like, I have to hold like wider angles. So he has to have his crosshair further away from where he normally would because like the reaction speed and all that kind of, and I forget, like I used to play Counter-Strike like that every day. And I completely forget that was like a big deal because it was 5 years ago now, right? But like, especially in Source, like high ping used to act as a bit of an armor because I could just keep moving. I wouldn't have to stop, and like people weren't able to hit me, but obviously I wasn't able to hit shit either. But it's just so strange that like we've gotten to this point. I think that the shows have been entertaining, right? Like I think that the Counter-Strike's been good. We've got, but in terms of what this means for the future, right? Do you think that there is room for online Counter-Strike to return? Daps, like we obviously moved only recently away to going LAN full time. With Flashpoint going LAN this year and Pro League meaning to be on LAN, everything was going to be on LAN. There was teams who hadn't played online shit in over a year. But do you think that online Counter-Strike has any place in the Counter-Strike world?
I think online Counter-Strike is fine. It's just can't weight it too high. Like I like coming from myself at least. Like I used to be the upset king. Like I would be on when I was like on denial. Like we were never expected to beat like Cloud9 or whatever, and then we would just like 16-1 them online when they were clearly the better LAN team. Or like there's been tons of times where I've been on teams that like we shouldn't, even like the old NRG when we had like PTR and Marky or whatever, or Little Man, we were beating like SK and stuff online, or like Liquid online, and we were clearly the worst team on LAN. So it's just like online results just don't matter that much in a lot of senses, just because it is like there's no pressure. Like there's a lot of factors to consider. Like there's players who play better online just because they don't feel pressured at all, or there's just sort of like nothing to lose. There is like ping advantages depending on the matchup. Like if a team's completely based out of Texas, like Complexity or Envious was, then they're gonna have a advantage because they have 5 ping, and then you might be playing people who like NAF, for example. Like I don't know if NAF does it because NAF gets like 80 ping to like most servers as well. But yeah, there's so many factors to consider where it's sort of like the integrity of online goes down a bit just because you can't keep like a even playing field for both teams.
Sure. Yeah.
There's Jack Razor in the chat says, I made so much money betting on denial. Thanks, Daps. That's from the skin betting.
That's from the CSGO lounge days. I used to get tweets all the time about that shit.
They weren't fun days. They weren't good days to be.
They were fun if you were winning.
No, I was rarely winning, Daps. So it's just mainly hate mail. All right.
Here's something I'm curious about, right? Because there's especially the discussion when there's big breaks between, like, I don't know, events that used to happen at the start of the year quite often, because we only had maybe like one event a month, where you had like in February of 2018 we had like a Star Series, the next month we had Katowice, and then the month after we had Sydney or whatever it was at the time. There obviously wasn't this like week to week. There was only one big event a month, or maybe like a month and a half, and obviously in that time there's nothing apart from scrims if you don't have online CS. So how do you look at this? Do you see online matches as a good way to like test what's actually working? Do you see it as better scrims in that way, or does it not matter to you?
I'd say I look at online matches as better scrims. Like you sort of like, obviously it's like there's a lot of prize money on the line now, so you should definitely treat it more seriously than in the past. But it's just hard. Like it depends on the team. Like I definitely think now that everything's moving to online, you have to sort of shift your mindset to like, this is LAN now, essentially, and you got to treat it like it's a LAN event, because if you don't, then you're just going to fall behind and not make the major probably. So I think now, especially since Valve announced that they're doing their system or whatever, like I know like a little bit about it. I didn't read too much into it, but you get like points essentially for doing well at online events. So I think now that that's a factor as well, it means a lot more.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be making people take the online Counter-Strike a lot more seriously. That's kind of where I was going with this. Is the only CS, and it's quite clear that even though the projections at this point towards the end of the year, everything being okay to travel, we don't know what's going to happen, right? So the current situation we find ourselves in is Germany said that shit's not open until, what is it, end of August? So, or was it Cologne? Anyway, I'm going to use that as my segue. So Cologne is at risk, for those of you who aren't too familiar with that, of happening or not because of the whole coronavirus situation. I think it was like 31st of August. I think they were saying they can't have the gatherings, which is my sister's birthday. So happy birthday to her when that comes around. But yeah, I think that that's fair enough. I think that anybody expecting any form of event with mass people to be put on before... I'm going to be generous and say before September is probably kidding themselves, and I'm being generous with September. So I think that the world as we know it is going to be on hold for a while, and online Counter-Strike is going to be it. But Counter-Strike has been having some changes, so we're going to keep moving, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to talk about these updates that have been happening recently. So I guess the first one here that we can probably we'll save that. Let's start with the weapon balance. We've got, obviously, the Krieg, thank fucking Jesus Christ, has been nerfed. So now that's no good for old people like me. But that's had a change. Obviously, the M4A1, the silenced M4, has been dropped 200 in price, I believe it is now. So it's 2,900.
Yep.
The AUG slightly adjusted. So all of those changes have come on through. The Tech 9's been slightly adjusted. The Deagle, they just put that one in to do with the jumping accuracy. So at the apex of the jump, it's not super accurate anymore. That's pretty cool. So all those changes have come through. Das, what's your initial thoughts other than yay, the Krieg's nerfed when all this came on?
You're talking about the weapon changes mainly?
Yeah, how do they make you feel in general?
I mean, I think they're overall like pretty good changes. Obviously, the jumping Deagle didn't make much sense, but I think they fixed it already. I think overall it's just a good update. I like if I can't talk about the Krieg, then there's not much to talk about. I think the A1's a little more.
You can talk about the Krieg for sure, but in the like, I just didn't want that to be the only platform of discussion here.
Okay.
So as far as let's talk about how the Krieg nerf affects the entire game, right? Because you can probably speak to this as an individual with AWPers on your team who would be feeling the wrath of the Krieg. Do you think it now tips the game back towards being CT heavy, that the Krieg's out? You know, that people are going to be a little bit more scared to take certain duels?
It's definitely map dependent, but I definitely think on some maps more than others, it frees up a lot. Like Dust 2, T-side was definitely a lot easier with the Krieg. I'd say most maps except maybe Inferno. The Krieg, like maybe Inferno is like the one map where I didn't really feel like it mattered that much. Definitely on most maps, like the Krieg could just be abused. If a player is good enough with it and they know like how to use it properly, then I mean even close range, like it shot faster than the AK anyway, so close range it wasn't bad either. It wasn't even just a range only gun, so I think overall it was just a pretty broken gun and it didn't make sense at the price point it was at.
Okay.
Do you think that the Krieg could? You mentioned Dust 2 as a map where it was exceptionally good. Do you think it could still, even with this nerf, which I think was just literally it was nuked out of existence almost? Do you think the Krieg could be used still on Dust 2 and in some cases?
I think there's I've seen teams in scrims buy it occasionally, even after the nerf, just testing it. I think it's still could be viable on maybe like a train or something, like going out inner and you just keep a Krieg upper like posted up. Like if you don't have money for an op or something, you can just get a Krieg instead, and like it's still pretty good long range, like for those long range fights. So I think there's still like the chance it's viable, but overall like it's just bad in most situations now. So I'd probably just rather have an AK anyways.
Do you think that the game will speed up a little bit with the Krieg out of play? Because what I really noticed in recent times was Counter-Strike had slowed down a lot, and I thought a lot of that was because of the amount of respect being given to Kriegs. You know, a lot of people not being willing to take certain duels and stuff. Do you think that the game might play a little bit quicker because the Ts don't have that weapon to just post up and hold angles for fucking 40 seconds anymore, or do you think it's played similar?
It's tough to say. I don't know if the speed of the game will necessarily speed up, but I think you'll definitely see some strategy, like more like the CTs are going to have more freedom to do things, I feel, that they weren't really able to do before. I felt just CT side was obviously 10 times harder with the Krieg in the meta, and the CTs were more or less willing, sorry, to take like reasonable fights that they normally take. So now like CTs, I feel, have a lot more freedom to play aggressively. I don't know if it's gonna change. Like it will change T sides a bit, but I'd say the change would more come from CT side, just because now I don't have to hide in a corner and like not
actually
take the fight.
Yeah. So
what about how the AUG affects this? Have you seen people try it again, or does it even matter, the change that they brought into it?
The only map I see the AUG used on is Nuke occasionally. I don't really see the AUG used. Like Train and Nuke are the only maps I see teams buy the AUG on. My team doesn't personally, but I see it used as an op replacement occasionally if you don't have money for an op.
We saw Brolin buying a little bit, but that's before these new changes came in. So I'm not quite sure how much has changed in the recent updates to CSGO with the AUG. I know there was...
Well, they buffed it, so...
Well, the accuracy was a little bit changed. Like,
so it's why you're unscoped, right?
Yeah. And like nerfed it slightly for the scopes.
Yeah, so now it essentially works almost the same if you're scoped or not, like the accuracy itself, but it's just like you are more zoomed in. So if you want to zoom in, you get the zoom, you get like a bit more accuracy, but essentially it's just like, it's more like an M4 now than just like a slightly better M4 now.
Okay, so this is probably more of a broader scope discussion, and this is just to get some opinions on this, but like obviously having to think about Counter-Strike every single day, it gets compared to a lot of other games, right? And like games like MOBAs can be balanced through the heroes or champions or whatever the fucking game calls them. In a game like World of Warcraft, they can like tweak the abilities and all that kind of shit. But in FPS games, or let's just use Counter-Strike. Let's just use Counter-Strike. Let's not talk about FPS games. For them to balance things, I've always been curious as to what you guys think is the best way to do that, because I want there to be innovation throughout, and I want there to be creativity. And I always thought of Counter-Strike on a really broad strokes scale, because of that's just the way that I've always looked at the game, is always looking at like the team element and like the strategies and all that kind of shit that we can do, right? But do you think that the weapon balances and stuff that they do is like Valve's version of updating the heroes, right? Because by updating the guns, and they're constantly going to do that. People who think that there's going to be a balance point and nothing gets changed, like that's never going to happen. They'll keep doing this to bring different stuff in. But do you think that's their way of giving different players different opportunities of approaching the game? Do you think that's like their balancing tool is like, well, it's not even a balancing tool. Their way of promoting innovation within the game is through having different weapons come through like this?
Well, that's basically all they can do.
Yeah, but maps, like if you change 2 maps every 6 months, you would see so much innovation from a team perspective, right? Like you think about that. If you had 2 new maps come in every time, daps could sit there and geek out a bunch of executes on those maps that probably no one will have. But because these maps sit in the pool for so long, like Mirage, everyone knows fucking Mirage. There's no innovation on Mirage, really. Like we're seeing, okay, the bench came through. Okay, well, we've seen a couple of different things because of the bench. But it's like, because they're so reluctant, I think it's harder for people, because they would have to look from a casual perspective as well, right? They probably think it's harder for people to learn new maps than it is to potentially practice just one new weapon or one updated weapon. Or you can just
ignore it if you don't want to use it, right? And then when people start using it and abusing it and killing you with it every time, then you're going to start using it, right? But you'll still play Dust 2 because you know Dust 2. So I think that makes sense from their perspective.
Yeah, like, do we think that's the best way that they go? Like Valve can do whatever they want. This is just a conversation. Do we think would you prefer fresher maps more often? Like, let's say 2 maps coming out after every major cycle, or would you prefer the weapon balancing like what they're doing now, or both?
I mean, I think constant updates are good in both areas, just to make sure it's either fresh or. Like, I didn't mind the Krieg being introduced as, like, a viable weapon, but it was way too viable, in my opinion. I think even nerfing it out of existence isn't that good of a move. I think it should still be, like, partially usable. Maybe, like, increase the price more, but make it closer to what it was, like, 3,500. Like, I think 3,500 was its original price in, like, the beta.
In like 1.6, it was 35, I think.
Yeah, I'm not
sure. I
sure.
remember that far. It should have been 330, 3,300 rather. But I don't remember about like previously.
But either way, I'm with you, Daps. I thought that what they should have done is kind of just leave. Obviously, not leave it exactly as it was. But if you adjust the price, my thought process was having it scale into the game. So obviously, like in the early stages, you're on the pistols, then you're on the SMGs. If you're feeling a little bit saucy, you get yourself a Galil, and then we'll upgrade the Galil. We'll get ourselves an AK. Oh, okay, I got enough money now. Maybe I'll get a Krieg. Maybe I'll get an AWP. You know, like they could scale into as the game progresses. But I guess that's probably enough of the weapon balancing conversation we've had for now. Is there anything else that's sticking out to people with that they want to carry on with?
I guess I think a lot of people were talking about like this meta being like extremely T-sided or stuff like that. I think Lucas has the spreadsheet you can bring out, and just to confirm what daps said at the beginning, that Dust 2 became like more T-sided, and there are stats here comparing, this is what Striker did, comparing the SG meta and like the 2018 meta, and you can see like Dust 2 became like 6% more T-sided.
In that, maybe it's better to compare it to the AUG meta, because obviously, like in the AUG meta, the Krieg wasn't used, so I'm not entirely sure that it's necessarily just the SG that made it T-sided. I feel like there was a point somewhere in between that where it became more T-sided, no matter what the weapon was. But still, it's pretty obvious that was like pretty much the only map that got buffed a lot.
Yeah, and Mirage as well. Mirage was as well turned into like a more T-sided map, but other than that, Inferno literally stayed the same comparing the stats, which is kind of funny because you said it didn't make any difference. That makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense, to be honest. And same with Nuke, like I feel like on Nuke specifically, it didn't really change much, considering like the main part where you could use the SG was outside, obviously, that there, I don't think there were that many fights anyway, because like it's fairly favorable towards Ts to fight outside than CTs, and especially like because they use a lot of smokes, it's not even possible to do a lot of the fights there. So I feel like when Nuke didn't change also makes quite a lot of sense. Inferno on top, that they just aren't that many long angles, so that makes perfect sense to me. While Mirage and Just 2 are like the quintessential like long range maps, so it's just quite, I felt like it was pretty reasonable.
Do you think that the economy as it is, daps, has a bigger sway on if the maps are CT or T-sided in your opinion, just from the way the game plays or it feels?
Yeah, I'd say the second round is like a fairly big problem. I think definitely that's why the price of the Krieg, like again, I don't think the Krieg should have been nerfed into the ground. I think they should have just increased the price and maybe changed like scoped accuracy or something. Maybe done like a small damage reduction or something. But other than that, I think the fact that teams are able to buy like the fact that CTs can have a worse buy on some maps than the Ts after losing pistol,
it's insane, isn't it?
Is absolutely absurd.
Yeah, because the money is very similar. Like if you plant and get like 4 kills, the second round you go into it, you have more or less the same money, CT and T, and T's, as we know, the AK is 2,700 and the M4 is 3,000. Now you get the M4A1S a bit cheaper. Does that change anything? I don't know. But when you add into that the T's can kind of pick their fights, and CTs really have to be spread out all over the map, however you turn it around. You have to use utility, you have to buy the fuse kit. All of that shit when it comes in, like even now when the Krieg is kind of shit, let's say, with the AKs, you'll still be very dangerous on the T side when you force buy in the second round. So I don't think that will be changed that much, unfortunately.
It's just really hard because the CTs have to buy utility on most maps because they can't just like assume you're not going to run like a certain strat, like a rush or something. But they have to sort of play for it. And like, yeah, the MP9 is pretty good. You can get MP9 full nades. But if you're just like, if a team just gets like 3 AKs and then like 2 of them have deagle, no armor with like a few nades, and they're just like contacting a site, and all they know you can't have an op, so you can just contact like 3 rifles and 2 deagles into an area, and you don't use your utility well, then they do have the advantage to some extent, depending on how they're like. Obviously, it's very situational, like map dependent.
Yeah, but they can definitely get away with having less utility than the CTs can, honestly.
Oh yeah, they literally, it's like they can just have a smoke and a flash, and they can win the round.
I hate it when like the games kick off and the CTs are doing like a decent job. They're building a bit of a bank, but then like the Ts are making sure they're killing like 2 every round, and then you have one swing round where they win some dumb clutch or some shit, and then your economy as a CT, let's say you've won 6 in a row or some shit, you lose one dumb swing round at that point, and then for the rest of the game you're buying, like bottoming out, you're at min loss bonus. You're just fucking sitting there, just hoping that you hang on to these rounds. When I'm watching that shit, I'm just like, bro, the intensity of those rounds, knowing that you could be money fucked for the tail end of that first half on the CT side on a map like Nuke, it's like, come on. Like that kind of shit just...
Especially because the CTs can't really do half of the things they want to do. Like you can't afford like double ops if you want double ops, if you play double ops. If you need like a shit ton of utility, you want to do like some aggressive play, you can't really do that because you can instantly lose a round and then you're fucked. So it kind of does deteriorate the level of CS. And I think that also plays into like Navi winning Katowice and stuff like that. It's just because they could play the MP9s, as we saw with fucking Boomich, just literally going 26-2 on Nuke and stuff like that, and getting an op on Simple and winning a 4v1, 1v4 or whatever. That's why these teams can get so much success, and teams like, I don't know, more tactical teams kind of suffered in some matches.
I think Flusher did it in the final the other day on Nuke as well. He was just using like the MP9, pushing outside on Nuke or playing Squeaky, and just like, I think he had like...
Playing Glock on the second round.
Yeah. Anyway, some people are just wilding. But let's talk over some new wild stuff. We're going to go to Vertigo. Now, if you don't know what Vertigo is, it's a Counter-Strike map. And it's a Counter-Strike map that never used to look like the way it currently looks. It did kind of resemble something similar to how it is now recently, and we have some updates. So what we're going to do is we've actually got some program or some software or some shit, and we're going to bring up different screenshots of the map here to talk through some of the changes. Now, Daps, have you had much chance to run around this map, check it out, see the changes?
Not really.
Okay, well,
not really.
To be your first time, this is my favorite map in the entire map pool. So I try and play as much Vertigo as possible. So the biggest thing...
Is it just because everyone else
don't
play
Vertigo, right?
It's because...
No, we do.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
What was that? What did I miss?
No. I thought they didn't play Vertigo, but it's like you kind of... Oh, yeah, don't play Overpass. There you go.
So here's the thing with this map. The reason I like playing it is because it's new. Is because it's actually fresh shit. Like, fuck Mirage. Anyway... okay, so the first thing...
Don't blaspheme, please.
I can't press my mic button and draw at the same time. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about is this change right here. This is where the squeaky door used to be before they nerfed that, not nerfed that, before they changed that as well. So now what they've done is they put a new way to have access to middle, which thank fucking God, because people were still kind of just using that A side. There's a little bit more towards B, there's a little bit more towards middle with some lurks, but now it's a very important part of the map. And this position right here, you can call it whatever the fuck you want. I don't care. I'm going to call it construction, because there's a lot of construction going on right there, as there is on the rest of the map. So I want to be as confusing as possible. But as you can note, the toolbox has gone from here. That's kind of a big change because that's one of the main points of cover for the CTs. Obviously, some big changes over towards the B-bomb site as well. So obviously, we're missing a Jenny there. There's a big change with the platform. So this section here is... lower now. I actually kind of like the way that this bomb site plays. There is a glitch. There's like a one-way glitch between this here and down here, so that Valve have to...
Oh, you can see through it, right?
Valve have to fix that. Yep, that's fine. They got rid of quad, or whatever you guys called that. That's gone now. That's the like the biggest part for me, at least on the B side, just because that was like an area that was used a lot by CTs when in defense, or even by Ts. It doesn't really matter. But that disappearing is, I think, is going to make by far the biggest difference out of all of these. It might, I think as well, what is hopefully going to happen is the site's not such a clusterfuck. Like, because if you look at it just here, obviously with all my lovely blue drawing on it, it looks a bit messy, but it's much more open. I'm going to see if I can change the screenshot here. So let's see how
actually
this goes.
like the quad being replaced by this like double beam thing actually makes sense that it works for the CTs when holding the site, but it doesn't actually work for the Ts. Kind of can work. You can still hold like towards the CT spawn. But it works better for people holding the site than holding against retakes, because retakes here were pretty shit. And it's just like a bigger bomb site, more open. So we hopefully won't see as many of those like smoke on smoke on smoke on smoke executes and retakes and just everything happening at the same time. So kind of makes more sense, especially when you add this like mid part, which is connected in.
I like this. Let me check. Hold on. I don't know if it's showing the new shit. It is. I like this bit here. Now, obviously, before there used to be a window here. Now we all know that's gone. But this little bit here, you can molly to clear the whole thing. But also, if you want to be super geeky, and I already tried it, is you can do triple boost. on either side of this to see either over towards middle or if they're pushing up towards B. I don't know how
so just
successful it's going to be.
Audio people, let's be
that's
like
right.
a bit more specific. Folks. So you're talking about triple boosting over the old window area is possible?
Sorry, I forget about the audio listeners. Yeah, so the little nook area here towards the front of the site, this one here, you can actually boost up to get up there. You can jump up this ledge. I've been playing around with that kind of shit. That seems pretty cool. The site layout's a little bit different. That's the main changes over towards B.
Well, let's talk about window though, because I feel like that's going to be a big change towards retakes, especially as well, just because CTs will have a harder time flanking, a lot harder time flanking in like retake scenarios than they have up to this point, because they're obviously going to have to go the whole way around, like through middle or something, or even like completely around to be able to flank, which I'm not a big fan of, honestly. Like that removes like a pretty big opportunity for the CTs, I feel like.
I think the site will play different though. Now, let me bring up this next one. Keep going, Prof.
I just wanted to say that even though they removed the window, now when you want to flank through ladder, it's closer because they added another like small hallway.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So even though it takes, obviously it will take more time, but it's shorter to go through ladder than it was before.
That connector, we don't actually have a picture of that, but that little room makes it easier to watch the A and the B push as well. So you don't need like two people deady to the flank. So you can actually have like, you might get timings and stuff, but I think that's it's worth it. I think that change is quite nice in that lower section. This one here, let me bring it up. It's quite interesting. I think they'll probably fix this. This line here, if you boost up in spawn in the back corner, you can actually, now to hit a shot here, you would need someone to be practically standing still or be Kenny S. But you can see with the ult from spawn, you can jump up yourself. You can see all the way to the B bomb site with this as they cross. So that's one interesting little thing that will probably get changed. I don't think that was intentional.
I feel like that has to be intentional. That's like such a weird gap that you don't really have anywhere on any map. I feel like that's going to be changed.
There was something similar on train a long time ago near like hump. I think there was.
What's hump?
But connector. As you come out connector, we call it hump because it's a fucking hump. Anyway.
Okay.
I guess I was the early one. This one here. Hold up. Fuck this, man. I got to click buttons and monitors and. Okay, this one here. This is the connector that we're talking about. This doorway. This doorway right here, and this goes across the other side. So as you would go into B normally, you now can't, like if you're the CT, you're looking down into like B storage, you can't go left anymore. You can only go all the way to spawn, which we can see here, or you can run through this little connector. This is my drawing.
I feel like this B entrance is now going to be like more like even more like banana than it was before, where it's just like a long kind of corridor thingy where you can fight and you can exchange utility early. They can drop theirs, you can counter, you can go through mollies or whatever.
You can't go to A.
Flashes.
Can't go to A the original way anymore?
Not around anymore. That's being
This is the only way.
off. Yeah, so you
No, this isn't the only way. You can still go like towards A, towards the right side from spawn.
Oh, can you?
But this is like this small door that they added. It's like like a T connector or something.
There we go. That's the other side of it for you, Daps. So like you can still come on this side. Oh fuck! You can still come from that direction, right? Like you can you can be running towards the bridge.
Made rotations quicker.
Yeah, but that little doorway through there helps out a bit.
I feel like this map is just way more T-sided.
I think
this is completely T-sided now, because now A is still viable as it was before, and now mid and B are even more viable.
This is a big change at A. Right, this is one of the big changes at A is you can't spam through this anymore, so you can't even harass the Ts while they're setting up nades, which is also the CTs can't get spammed, right? So that it takes damage, but it's not as much, obviously. So that means you can probably play these positions a little bit more. Yeah,
I feel like this helps the Ts more still though, because now they don't have to worry about being spammed.
Yeah, because they CTs had a much better like idea of what the angles are. Obviously, like CTs could hold anywhere, but Ts usually are going to go through like one part of that. So yeah, I agree with that for sure. The Ts are gonna get help with this.
I actually think this is like this not being wallbanged. I think it's very much helps the CTs, just because like you literally could not play this like short area as a CT because you just die. People just spam you because there was like two Ts were sitting on ramp spamming like 60 bullets.
It's still not that good of a spot.
Sometimes you just die.
But even without this, like even without the spam, it's so easy to clear this because you just smoke site and then you can molly that anyways. Like most teams molly that regardless.
Or you can peek at multiple people and just like reach to like refrag basically.
Yeah,
like,
it's
such a hard
spot's not
spot.
even like most of the changes, at least in theory, it looks like it helps the T side a lot. Because now, like before, a lot of teams could just give up mid on CT without worrying about it too much, and they could just play like 2B, 3A, and then occasionally check on mid. But now mid actually is better for the Ts because they can split B easier. And B's also harder to hold because now you can't even just smoke the main choke point at B anymore.
Yeah, you
with
can,
one smoke.
You have to throw a real deep one.
Yeah, so now the meta probably will be you have to fight for B stairs control more. And you're probably going to play like to hold the B stairs and then have one guy like it's probably going to be 2-1-2s a lot. But then now you're not really going to be able to do heavy A stuff as much because now Ts can use B and mid more. Yeah, I don't know. It seems really hard for the CTs.
I think that it's just going to mean that like it'll be more of a traditional CT-sided hold, right? So obviously, if they still want to dump numbers over towards A to do the smoke off the beam and fight down, into the forklift room, that's still a possibility. But now, like this area we're in right here, like being able to play this as the CT, it seems good, right? I'm talking about this.
Yeah.
But as soon as a smoke or a Molotov is worked out, Stunner was awake at 6 a.m. this morning. He was working out a smoke to throw here on 128 tick server from spawn, and he worked it out, right? So props to him. But he's already worked out a smoke that lands here, so this position can already be negated with one smoke, just completely isolated, or you could just molly it back or something like that. So for the CT, it's going to be a place that as soon as you get mollied out, we've seen nade stacks probably to here as well. It's going to be hard to hold middle because then your only other points once you get pushed back is you're going to have to hold passive like you had before, and then the options are splits and shit. So it is going to get more difficult, but the one positive I would say is I think the bomb sites, at least B, as you mentioned before, Prof, it won't be just smokes on top of each other. You actually probably have some better scenarios going down on the bomb sites, or at least I hope. We'll just get to see what's next in the fucking chapter.
I agree with daps about like it being more T-sided because mid makes more sense, and maybe B doesn't make that much sense because even though you can get into the site, I think retakes for the CTs will be easier. But I think if this map wants to be viable, the A site needs to be a bit harder, or the A ramp needs to be a bit more harder for the T side.
Honestly.
Because this time they can easily take ramp, do the same shit they did before with A executes, and then they still have all of these options in mid and in B to do stuff on the T side. So I think that is kind of the issue with Vertigo right now. Even though I like the mid and B, I think they kind of play as a map should play. Like taking this mid control makes sense, the angles make sense, and B can be fought for in different ways. But yeah, I think still it's going to be so easy to get the bomb down on A and just fuck the CTs like that.
You really think? I think retaking B is going to be harder for the CTs.
Because now it feels a little bit more open, but the Ts don't really have that many spots to hide anymore. Like considering the quad
it looks
is
like
gone,
site's pretty good, like behind those boxes. And now you don't have to worry about the window anymore.
Yeah, that's the big part for me.
So you just literally have one guy watch the flank, and you can just have 4 people watch one side. It's not that hard to watch the flank. Like the guy can just hide like under the stairs or like behind the sandbag, and then now the Ts can like hide behind these boxes. I don't know if those are headshot angles or not.
These ones here,
the smaller ones should be. The smaller ones should be small, too small to hide behind, right?
I can't draw it. Right? That one is huge that you just circled.
Yeah,
that's a big one, double box. And these are kind of not headshot angles, just like I don't know, chest angles or something like that. So I think like using some utility. You can also pick like a Colzera angle towards like the right side of the everything. So I don't know. I think
it's going to be a lot harder.
Okay.
It's going to be a lot harder to retake because A is still easy for the Ts. It seems like nothing's really changed. So the people that are going to be rotating into B to retake it probably won't have much utility left because they're going to have to use it earlier in the round anyways if a team defaults, and then. Now, the Ts can't hide quad anymore, which is where the pillar is now at the back of the site. But I don't think you can smoke off the entrance with one smoke because there's like a weird sandbag there for some reason.
Yeah, that is pretty huge. You can't really smoke that off.
But you can't really
maybe
smoke that
you can,
off.
but it's pretty hard.
Well, you'll need 2 smokes so they can like
But you
play
can smoke
around
here now.
it.
Like,
Yeah,
because they can boost up to go this ledge, but you can smoke off and just watch them boosting up, right? You'll see their head as they're jumping up in theory. Obviously they got flashes and shit. But like, I think in terms of this,
I don't think teams are gonna play back there anymore. Like I said, I think it's gonna play out now where one guy will stay and watch flank back there, but the majority will just be pushed up. Like if you have one guy at the E box is what we call it, or like if you have one guy there just hiding, and then 2 guys are like at the boxes behind, and then you have like the fourth. If like this is like best case scenario for the T's, obviously, but like hiding at the other beam, like across from where the quad was, like behind it, like there, that's a really hard retake. Because now the T's don't have to worry about someone jumping through window, which honestly was a saving grace at times for the CTs. Because now they just look at one. Yeah. So I don't know. I think it's a lot harder.
Yeah, just a shitload of fucking retake simulator. We haven't had enough of that with Dust 2 recently by any means, have we? Fuck. All right, we're going to wrap up Vertigo. We're going to keep moving forward. And we're going to discuss if Valve have been doing a good job with these updates. So for those of you who missed it as well, they obviously added in their community map Anubis to the competitive map pool. And there's the 1v1 arenas for Train and Vertigo now.
By the way, what do we think? What do we think about Anubis? Because apparently there's this rumor that it could come into the actual map pool.
Yeah,
at some point.
That is a discussion. I don't know. Has everyone run around that map and had a little bit of a look at it?
No, I actually haven't. No.
Okay.
I'm just curious about if anybody has.
So I ran around it. We played a couple games on it last night. I didn't think it was a terrible map. I think that it offers itself pretty nicely to a Mirage replacement because of the color scheme of the map. They've got that sandy.
Let me just check out quickly.
Don't say that.
But I think the way that the map plays, it's pretty cool. It has it has this weird kind of like sewer, like water system where if you're a B player on the CT side, you can kind of push on out, and if you get mid control as well, you can stop the T's from being able to drop down. It's this kind of cool thing, but it's different fights. Like you can play for map territory, you can play passive. It seems to have a bit of everything. Now whether or not it comes and replaces Mirage, that would be pretty wild, right? And I know that players really don't want to have to learn a whole new map because that's a lot to add to their workload. But I think from a viewing perspective, it would be cool to have a new map. Now, a lot of people are newer Counter-Strike fans and don't remember when we had Overpass and Cobblestone come in. Maybe you remember Vertigo. That was a pretty jarring change. And I see people like, how can they be updating the map while it's in the competitive map pool and changing the whole thing? Well, ladies and gentlemen, Valve do mysterious things. In the early majors, we randomized for a map in a best of one. And not only that, we added Overpass and Cobble into a major just before it, and NIP fucking won a major based off Cobble being in the map pool and getting randomly fucking selected. Now,
three times in a row. Yeah.
Now, I don't want to say that that's not a good system, but it's not a good system. So, like, instead of questioning why it's not the way you think it should be, let's just look at what the facts in front of us are.
One thing, like you can't balance a map or update a map for competitive play without it being competitively played. Like, of course, you can do a better job than what maybe Valve did with Vertigo before they introduced it by doing like some sort of cups or something, somehow encouraging pros to play it. But until it is actually being prepared for by pro teams to play on it in a pro environment, like you won't discover 90% of the things that you need to change on the map. So I think it's kind of like people are trying to like, I don't idealize what should be done with before a map joins the competitive map pool, but it's, in my opinion, it's impossible. Like it can't happen.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing pros are good at, it's how to play the map best, right? How to find like little quirks that are gonna
almost like
them.
They are pros, and like those guys in Valve's headquarters are not pros and can't do the same things.
Yeah, exactly.
But that there, so if none of you touched it, we won't dig too much into it. But I think the idea of a fresh map coming in is good. To keep people on their toes and pushing forward within the game. So I think that's a positive. But in terms of, let's talk about this because this is a conversation that people are having a lot, and this is a conversation that most people have been having for years. when we're talking about, you know, competition for Valve and CSGO. Now, obviously, Valorant is out. For those who aren't aware, it's in beta right now. You've probably seen it.
Fucking impossible to miss it.
Yeah, some people, maybe they only like Counter-Strike, and that's fine too. But they obviously have a lot of features in that game that are really good for new users. I think that is a clear thing. Now, whether or not we would want all of those features within Counter-Strike, it might make things too easy. That's a discussion for another time. But right now, there being clear competition in the open field has got people going, oh, they're only doing these updates because of Valorant, this, that. Okay. If you think
that's a good thing, though, yeah.
First of all, it is a good thing. And second of all, if you think that Valve weren't going to be adjusting things like the Krieg or that kind of stuff, and you're putting that on the Valorant stuff, that's a bit silly. But if you're going to say that they put the crosshair command in because it was in Valorant, it was really cool, and it's something that people can quickly grab and talk about, it's a fun feature and keeps the community active, yeah, that right there. And I'd be doing the same. It's called working smart, not hard, motherfuckers. And people who are like, Valve don't care, they're not doing shit for us when there isn't competition, you also don't know what you're talking about, because they have made the most popular FPS game of all time. I don't know if that's factually true. In my mind, that's true.
I think you can say that without like bias. I think that's pretty fair to say.
But not only that, we've gotten to this point, right? And people are like, oh, but this could have been so much earlier if there was competition and shit. But there wasn't. We're not living in that world, right? Why would also a company with billions of dollars want to work harder when they don't have to? Because all you motherfuckers at home in high school, I know the way you operate. You have an assignment due in 4 weeks' time. What do? You procrastinate until that Sunday night before you have to go hand that assignment in, and you all cram it. Why do you think the company of Valve need to do anything quickly? They don't need. They're a private company. They're making billions of dollars. They don't give a fuck, right? And the thing is, like, you go, well, they want to make more money. How many swimming pools do you reckon Gabe needs? You know, that's the real question I have here. How many swimming pools you think that motherfucker needs? He doesn't need any more. Definitely not filled with money. Now, it's great that there is competition and they're doing little bits and pieces. But whether the Source 2 rumors, where the fuck did they start? Does anyone know?
There was a guy who said it on videos, like a self-proclaimed insider into Valve, who said like it's coming within 2 months or something. Who knows how credible that guy is? I have no idea who that is or what the network is.
He has like a pretty credible YouTube. Like his history of Valve leaks is pretty strong. Like he isn't like a random guy that just like started posting shit. So he's been on the Valve news for some time. So obviously he has some input. And Norse did as well. He also had some correct leaks about Valve updates and stuff like that. So there is apparently something about that.
Okay, so daps, do you have any insider goss that you can share with us? Are any of the pros talking about it? They're getting any info from Valve? I know you guys are all on really good terms. You're talking all the time.
I have not heard anything.
Yeah, so I think
officially,
I think that's probably the case here in the sense of if something does come out, if it does happen, we do get Source 2. I think a lot of people have to consider that they would probably want to make sure that is as smooth as possible. So even if Valorant drops and they're not ready, I wouldn't expect Valve to rush that out, you know?
Did you ever talk to a Valve, like a dev from the game, like at a major or anything?
Yeah, I did at Cologne 2016 with Devil Walk. We talked.
What was the experience like?
It was fine. We were talking to them. That was like before the player union was started, and we were talking to them about just like that type of stuff. But yeah, I mean, they were pretty reasonable. Their opinion of CS is more so like, how do we convert viewers to players is like one of their main, at least back then, that was like their main objective, is like, how do we get people watching to play CS?
I mean, that makes perfect sense from their point of view, obviously, like business wise even.
Yeah. So, I mean, it makes sense. Like, they're a business, they're developers. So, I mean, they see that they're pretty friendly. Like, obviously they listen to stuff, and that was around the time where we were like, also asking if like the iBuyPower guys could get unbanned, or if there was a possibility. Didn't seem like there was a possibility. Like, they obviously wouldn't make a hardline stance on it, but sometimes you'd get one of them saying like, yeah, there's probably not going to happen, or like, there's not a chance.
Do we think they'll bother with anything like 128 tick service for matchmaking and stuff? Do you think that's necessary from a pro standpoint? I would assume probably not, daps.
I think their perspective on it was something that has to do with how a lot of people in the world don't have really good computers, and if they switch everything to, I don't know how it works technically, but I assume 128 tick is higher performance, which means maybe some computers can't run it. I'm not sure, but
yeah,
that seemed to be their concern, was like if they start moving things to like other systems, then other people aren't going to be able to play essentially.
Do you think that now that Valorant has 128 tick servers, that might encourage them striker?
Probably. I mean, that there's definitely something that they're probably considering, like, periodically, if there's like that they have data on. But that's like, it's hard to say what's really keeping them from doing it. Actually, it's probably like whenever this port to like a new engine is going to come, that's I assume a point where a change like this would happen. Just because, like, programming wise, it's probably going to be more like, well, what do you call it?
Optimized.
Optimized. There you go. Better optimized to be able to run for like different kinds of hardwares and stuff like that. I'm not an expert. I'm just like, I have a vague understanding of how this works, so I can't really comment from with like too much expertise. But that's, if a port comes to a new engine, I can see that happening. Not until then.
Yeah, well, because they have a good opportunity, like I was saying, with a bit of a pause button to reset the matchmaking, to have a much more comprehensive system. If they're concerned, like, because majors for them, for people who aren't too familiar with this, for Valve, a major is a marketing tool. For us, it's the World Championship of CSGO. So we obviously have conflicting interests in that event. We want to find out, as the purists, who the best Counter-Strike team in the world is, which doesn't necessarily align with Valve, who are using the majors as a marketing tool for their product, right? They don't do any advertising for Counter-Strike, really. So that's what the majors are. So that's for all you out there who are just catching up.
I also think just one thing to add before we end this whole thing about like 128 tick, like matchmaking progression or something like more to play for. Like, one of the things that Valve has been doing, and I think is a good thing just in general, is having an open ecosystem with other companies being able to build their, I don't know, like IP or something on CS, which is like Faceit, ESEA, on all of these like fringe companies that help people that want to do something different. They can do it there, and then Valve doesn't have to fuck with that, essentially. Like, they don't have to make special anti-cheat and then a special progression, like deeper progression into ranks and stuff like that. And I think they don't want to take that piece of the pie away from ESEA or from Faceit, because these are companies that really help to build up the game, and that is what kind of differentiates Valve from Riot, let's say, which do like to just let everyone do the groundwork and then take everything away and build it internally. So I think, to a degree, obviously they can add now 228 thick and do things that are more geared towards casuals in terms of matchmaking, but I don't think it will ever take over everything as it is in like League of Legends or whatever, where everything's in the client, right?
Yeah, I think Counter-Strike's always been stepping stones, right? I think all of us who have been playing for a long period of time would remember when you first started playing just either with some mates or for some fun or whatever, and then you had to slowly progress into finding out what a fucking official was, or, you know, even what a scrim was, clan tags, finding IRC, doing all that shit. Counter-Strike was always progressional, right? And I think it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does make the barrier for entry a little bit harder, because you need to be willing to seek out this kind of information. Now we're going to move forward. I already asked a bunch of questions to daps about NACS earlier in the piece, so we'll probably speed through some of these ones here, and then we'll get on to talk about the RMR, and that'll probably be it. So daps, we're gonna fuck off the stuff about what's it like now being an NACS pro, because you already covered that a little bit with like the practice and all that kind of stuff. But we'll go to a man who's very close to your heart. Chet getting replaced by Zeus. Do you think that in terms of a change that was always going to happen, that it was always going to be Chet to be the first one to go here if things weren't operational?
I mean, their results haven't been good for a long time. Like, I think their win
Since
percentage
New York,
was
right?
like, yeah, since they won the Turkey LAN and then the New York one. But ever since then, they've been pretty like lackluster considering the players they have on their team. Yeah, I mean, a change was always going to happen. Like, I honestly didn't expect Chet to get replaced, just because I know how like hard he works and how much time he puts in. But obviously, like, the players decided that instead of making a player change, they're going to make a coach change before a player change, I assume is what happened. And like it could work out, it could not, like who knows, but I assume they probably had a talk where it's just like, you know, we won 2 lands with this lineup. Let's like just try with a new coach and maybe it'll work out. And maybe it will. Like I think Zeus is a good coach. Could bring some elements or ideas that maybe weren't thought of before. Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think like if the community is looking at it from the perspective of Chet was the problem and that's why he was removed, that's not the case by far. Like there's no way just removing a coach is going to make your team magically play better.
So let's do this then, if you don't mind. This is you can skip this one. But from your, I don't know how much of EG's game you've watched in recent times or ever since Stan's kind of taken over there. But what do you think the downfall for that team is at the moment? Why do you think that they're much streakier now than they were when you were there and you were making consistent playoffs?
I mean, I don't know the full structure of the team, like how much say other people have, or if it's like only Stan that makes the decisions, or if like I don't know the complete structure, but I would say they play looser in a way where it's like they could have higher highs and lower lows. Like it just seems like play less consistent. But I also think some of their players are slumping as well at the same time, so it's hard to like judge. Like personally, like when I was on the team, Ethan was like our best player by far for a while, and then eventually Cirque like kind of took the mantle from him, and then Breezy eventually just came along and wiped the floor with both of them in terms of consistency. I've never really seen Ethan play so inconsistently as he has been. I'm not sure if it's a credit to the system or he's just struggling a little bit individually, but Ethan's like, I've always said Ethan was like the best player I ever played with, just because of like, you know, there's like obviously Breezy is the best player on that team just from like you looking from the outside in, but I think Ethan is a player that's like an IGL's best friend, and he brings a lot of ideas and like he helps coordinate a lot of things, and there's a lot of elements to his game that aren't considered when looking at him as a player. And then he also generally, when I played with him at least, was like one of our best players by far. So I think there's just a lot of people on the team not doing as well as they used to do. In terms of consistency, it seems like Breezy's the only one that kind of like, even Cirque to some extent has sort of been like up and down here and there, whereas Breezy's sort of the only guy that's like always putting up big numbers and saving them in a lot of games when I watch, at least. So okay. It's definitely not one problem on the team. Like there's a bunch of issues happening for sure.
I'm curious about one thing, since you played with that trio, right, that you mentioned, Ethan, Cirque, and Breezy. With ImAPet leaving and basically that being down to a rift between him and Stan and Tarik from everything that we've seen, does the other trio just not have as much of a voice, or are they all kind of seem shy to me, in a sense, at least the two, and maybe not Cirque, but at least the other two seem pretty shy to me, seem like not particularly like keen on taking big decisions and stuff like that. Do you feel like the EG has kind of become a little bit of like a Stan and Tarik powerhouse, or how do you call it?
Well, I mean, in terms of like who creates the ideas, it's definitely Stan or Tarik. I mean, for sure. I mean, I know Breezy's just the kind of guy where it's like he's like the last guy to have the opinion on it. At least when I played with him, like he'll kind of, like when Breezy says something, it usually happens, but he's usually like the last guy to have an opinion on it.
Okay.
But yeah, I'd say most people on the team outside of Stan and Tarik are pretty like they have their opinions. Like obviously if they were talking a lot, like there was eventually a point in there where someone either convinced them that it was the right decision, or maybe they just didn't really feel that strongly about it. They were just like, sure, if you think it's better, then it's whatever. Like I know not every player on that team like completely thought like it's a very like weird situation, because like I don't think any player on that team thinks like just getting rid of Chet's gonna magically solve all their problems. And I don't think any of the players like believe that, to be honest. But it's just sort of like I think they're just trying to save the lineup they have right now and just give it like another shot because they did win 2 good lands. So,
well, where I was going with this, like, do you see anybody other than, let's say, Stan or Tarik leave or be kicked, basically?
I mean, I think the power still lies in the trio. Like, if Breezy, Ethan, and Cirque got together and made a decision, it would happen. Like, there's no question about that. But they're generally not the type of players to like bring decisions to the forefront. It would be definitely be like like Tarik has the most experience. Obviously, like even when I played with Tarik, he's pretty opinionative about things. Same with Stan. Like he's an IGL, so of course he's gonna have opinions. So it's like, even though they got the blame for their replacement, like, of course they're going to be the decision makers and sort of like lay out why X, Y, and Z should be done. I'd say Ethan, out of the trio of like younger players, Ethan would be the most opinionative over Breezy and Cirque, at least with my time there. And then they are pretty passive though, the other 3.
I think one of the things that also people didn't really think about is, let's say this was a rift between Stan and Tarik and ImAPet. Okay, Tarik, you can replace with a different rifler kind of player, but if you really wanted to replace Stan, that would be a hard thing to do right now, especially in North America where there aren't a lot of in-game leaders. So that is a thing. The other 3 players, when considering the change, are like, okay, are we going to change a coach? Especially now that Zeus is... I don't know how that happened. Like, did the change really happen because Zeus became available or something like that? But it is a much easier replacement than replacing the in-game leader for anyone else that is available.
Yeah, making a coaching change is a lot easier to make than replace, especially like in IGL and NA. There's a drought of IGLs in NA, and especially since a lot of players are moving over to Valorant, there's a lot of like, there's not many people coming up in NA at least, where it's like people's jobs are not in danger anymore because there's not many people coming up to like threaten those jobs. And I honestly, I don't think Stan is even bad, to be honest. Like I don't know like all the problems. Like I'm sure there's multiple problems in the team, more so than just like the way ImAPet put it. He put him versus like Tarik and Stan essentially. Like, I think there's more to it than that, but it's just like maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. Like, they're just trying something different. I think Zeus is a good coach.
I think as well for Chet, like if a lot of people need to realize his age. He's obviously, still quite a young guy. He's going to have plenty more coaching opportunities, I'd assume, with the resume that he has. And that tweet longer he wrote was probably just after being told you no longer have a job anymore, which, considering the times we're in, must have been a pretty confronting scenario. But for him to come out and say things like that as if it was common knowledge, like in his statement there, I thought that was quite unique to see.
It was pretty bridge burning.
I wish I knew more of that shit though. That's all the juicy stuff, right? That's all the fun shit. But there's something you just said there.
He did learn something from Stan from his like 6 months, let's say.
Okay, well, look, I never wrote a vitriolic twit longer. Maybe I should. But you mentioned something about players moving to Valorant. Now, North America as a whole doesn't have as many players as Europe, obviously, because you're maybe one massive country. You obviously got Canada involved in there. We'll include your country, I suppose, as well, daps, if we have to. But you guys don't have a player base that's as big. You've obviously never been able to keep up with the meta because things are evolving in Europe so quickly. Now you're saying that a portion of that player base, these are obviously the players who can't make the teams to which you guys are in, are going to go try their luck at Valorant, which makes sense. People need to make money. I get it. But do you, at the moment, have any names who are on the come up? Any streaming kids? Any kids in FPL, or I don't even know what you guys play over there anymore? That look like they could be talents of the future? Because it seems like those names have stopped for a while. We hear about Flop, we hear about this, we hear about that. But is there any kids that we haven't seen?
I mean,
even
I would say like, I mean, Floppy's an obvious one. I think Floppy. I'll just start with the obvious ones, I guess. I think Floppy's really good. Like, he could be on a better team if he had the opportunity to, for sure. I think Cooper as well on Swole Patrol is like pretty consistent opper. Like, I think he definitely is really, really good. Even Marky to some extent. Like, there's a lot of players on Soul Patrol that like could potentially be like, even Food, like he's overlooked a lot, but he's like a pretty good teammate from what I've heard, and like played with him, like seems pretty overall like smart about the game, like knows what to do. Grim on Triumph is like really, really good in terms of like individual. I don't know how he is as a person, but in terms of like skill, he's really, really strong in that department. And like even on Orglis, like FNS has like some pretty good pieces. Like I think Sub Rosa, in like even like honestly, the whole team has players that are like pretty good in their own respect. Like Wardell, you have Infinite, and then Ye as well. Even like Ye made top 8 at a major, and he has his flashes where he's just like insanely good. There's a lot of players in NA that I think if they had the right like either leadership or just like experience around them, they could be really, really good. And then yeah, you could make like you could make a few strong teams out of like all those teams, depending on who goes where.
Here's a dumb question, right? But how do you fix that then? Because obviously there is a lot of talent within North America. You guys are all relatively well off. Like we're not seeing too many players out there who are, you know, have to work a full-time job while playing Counter-Strike. It's more being able to do 50-50 casual jobs and still playing Counter-Strike and streaming, all that kind of shit. What would be the change to make North America like the powerhouse? Like, how are you going to bring in a bunch of big brains? Is it even possible? Are there enough names out there to mentor these kids, or do you have to look overseas?
I think it's really tough because I think Steele is one of the better IGLs as well in NA that like could do that. But the problem now for him especially is like, since all these events are turning into the RMR thing, I don't think he's allowed to play in any of them.
Oh fuck.
So like for Chaos, it's a really shitty situation because it's like you kind of have to keep Steele because he is like honestly the best player on the team in my opinion, and he's the IGL. But then you also can't play in like 80% of things that are going to happen, especially if tournaments start sanctioning them. I think Valve's allowing tournaments to sanction them as RMR events. So it sucks a lot for them. I think Vanity was like the only IGL that was sort of up and coming, and he is on Chaos. But other than that, like there wasn't really any up and coming IGLs that I know of, at least, other than Vanity, I think.
It's a shit job, isn't it? No.
And I guess Freakazoid is calling now on Soul Patrol. But I'm not sure if that's because he really wants to or because it's out of a necessity. But I mean, Freakazoid's played for fucking forever. Like I remember him in Source. Like, yeah, Freakazoid has a ton of experience. So
I mean, there was a time where he had like a big voice in Cloud9 as well, and that whole run that they had. So I can see that.
Yeah, Freakazoid seems like a leader of men.
Yeah, people in chat are mentioning Sheikh Zula, and I don't know him as a player or as a leader or much of anything about him, but I did read an interview he had like a couple of days ago, and just seeing how he talks seems like an EU player, not an NA player, so that is like plus rep for me. We'll see if it leads to anything, but it seems like a level-headed guy, kind of understands. And he also did say what Sponge said, it's a shit job, like you get fucked so often, right?
I think Sheikh Zula went from like being a player to a coach, then a player again. I'm not sure what he's at right now.
He did the daps then.
Yeah, so I'm not sure what he's doing right now, but yeah, I don't know too much about him. Right? Yeah, I think so.
Now I
think he's back with Triumph.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I got a fun one here. This is for everybody. Will NA struggle due to regionality of online Counter-Strike? Now, let's just assume it will, because it will. How much do you think this is going to set North American Counter-Strike behind? We'll start with you, Daps. Because I think we could argue that it was on par with Europe almost, right? At least with the big names. So how much do we think it's going to drop off now that potentially on the sidelines for the better part of 6 months watching European CS?
I don't think it'll drop off too much because now that everyone has to stay in NA, the practice will be better inherently since the good team. Like usually NA practice sucks because EG, Liquid, and MIBR and 100 Thieves are always gone. And even Fury as well. So like all those teams are always gone, and then you can't practice essentially. So now that they're all here, it's not a huge deal. I'd say the only factor would be ping. So like depending on where certain teams are located, like I know EG has Tarik's in New York, Stan's in Canada, and then Breezy's also in like Florida. But I mean, if it's Dallas, then that's not a huge deal for him. But like ping will be a fact even for NAF. Like Dallas, he's in Vancouver. But like there's certain players that'll be affected by it more so than others, and certain teams will be affected more so than others. So I'd say it depends. But I don't think like NA teams are gonna fall behind necessarily because like I think the prac will stay pretty good.
Okay.
I think it's potentially going to prevent some roster changes though. Like for example, EG, even if they keep sucking for the next like couple of months, they're probably still going to look at it as like online and like they haven't really been able to ramp up again. So I feel like in those cases where teams potentially could have changed, or even Liquid, like if they thought they realized, okay, we're not going to be the strongest with this lineup, we just have to change a piece or something. Like that's probably not going to happen until we restart. So like from that side, I can see like a delay.
I agree. I think it's really, really hard to warrant a roster change based on online results. Obviously, if you're just losing every match, then like you're probably going to make a change regardless of it being online or not. But like, I don't think any team will do that bad online to the point where they'd make a change. It is a really tough scenario because like online is different from LAN. There's no arguing that, and to just make a change based on online results is pretty tough, especially now since that RMR thing exists. You lose 20% of your points from like that event. So making a roster change even affects if you make the major or not now.
That's a good segue yet again. Daps, you keep fucking nailing these, mate. You keep hitting them. Prof, just quickly, before we move on to talk about the RMR, do you think it's going to drop off significantly, moderately, not at all? What are you thinking?
I think it will be like a 1 or 2 month period where we see like NA teams being a little like a baseline worse than the Europeans when we go back to LANs all the time. But okay. I think it will catch up. But at the same time, might be interesting if NA teams develop like something different of like a different style or a different meta. Obviously, everyone's watching everyone's demos, but when you play, it's a different thing. So maybe something happens along those lines where it becomes more like the start of CSGO or the old times where people played like NA played it with NA, Europe played with Europe, and then had like 2 tournaments a year where they played, and we could actually see different styles. Because I don't think we have an NA style that much on the top level anymore. It's just like everyone's playing CS. But
yeah. That's like when I talk about Asian CS, right? And how it used to be in 1.6 be like quite distinct because they only could practice with themselves. And when they'd come over to play against the Europeans or whatever, that is very clear. We don't have that because everyone seems to play everybody. But now we can move forward. Striker or Prof, which one of you wants to put your hand up?
I can do if you want to do like a rundown of the MRR, I can do it.
Here's what I want. Here's what I want from you. I want from the very top, I want the transition from obviously the system that we had in play that was going to be going on LAN to this new one, right? You don't have to go into the details of the LAN one, but obviously we were going to be doing a new system for the next major, which forget completely about Brazil.
Okay. Well, originally for the second major of the year, it was supposed to be the Rio major would have had like a certain amount of points alongside 2 more LAN events that would happen between July and September, I think it was, right? That would determine basically the top 16, and then the rest came from minors, right?
Yep.
So that's how it's supposed to work. Obviously, that's been a little bit changed. Now it's basically 4 events that are going to determine all of those 24 teams, and it's basically like ramping up in points depending on how like the way you get closer to the actual major, the more points you get of the latest event. So the start of the major is fairly irrelevant for the teams that like didn't place like somewhere in the top. And then it gets like more important how well you place in the ranking events, because obviously Starland Major took place like 6 months ago or more than that now, 7 or 8 months. So it makes sense that it doesn't really have that much of an impact on who gets invited in the end. And how Valve will do it is just they assign a number of slots to each region in which they're going to play these events, and based on the amount of points, the top 9 in Europe, top 5 in NA, top 5 in CCIS, and then 1 from each of the smaller regions are going to get an invite to the major as a legend or as a challenger or as a contender, depending on how high they place, obviously. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, so with these events, do we know how many events are slated? With the new thing that they released, right? It was 3 events.
Well, yeah, four qualifying events, and essentially including the majors. So the major, Road to Rio, and then 2 more major ranking events somewhere in the summer and fall.
Because TOs needed to have their pitch in like a couple of days ago, right?
Yep,
so
yep.
I guess Valve can probably pick that pretty quickly.
I guess, like, my question to Striker is, like, these are the only ranking events that are going to happen.
I'm pretty sure that's
so.
All,
like,
so
DreamHack Masters will not be
no,
or anything else. So only
unless
these
they will just like no, they just can't, right? Because it's just going to coincide like some parts of it and stuff. Or it's actually not going to coincide, so it technically could be one, but I don't think it's going to be, just because it's already been like everything's already been announced, including like invites and stuff like that, which is obviously different for the major ranking events, which is going to be dependent on how they're placed in the major ranking up to now. Based on that, they're going to invite like a number of teams to the next one, plus some open qualifiers. But obviously, it doesn't look like it's going to be Masters. Based on that, it's just going to be some other events.
I wonder if they're going to. Daps, you might know more, and obviously you can't say right now. But do you have any fears that the player break would be scheduled over? I know no one's going on holidays in this player break, but is that a concern?
I don't think it's that much of a concern, at least from my point of view. Like, I think most pros would prefer to just keep chugging along, considering how things are going.
Yeah. So what are we at the moment? We're almost in spring, right? So a couple more months until this summer event. So it could be bang in August. So you know what it is? Sounds like you know what it is.
You're saying. Okay, you're saying, do I know if there's an event during the player break?
Well, that's kind of where I was going with it.
Okay. I don't.
He doesn't want to ask, but he wants you to say it.
I
so
don't.
He doesn't get any of the blame for you leaking it.
I don't know if there actually is, but I wouldn't be opposed to it because it's right now. Like, I don't think anyone would travel on vacation anyways with how things are.
Of course,
it's not even worth risking it. But
well, I mean, summer potentially, like the player break is still 3 months away, which is a time where like it's probably now going to, everything's now going to resolve itself. But we can assume that there's going to be some development, something's going to change up a little bit. I'm not sure it's going to be like international travel like across the globe everywhere and stuff. It's going to be regionalized and stuff, but it's probably going to be a little bit better by then.
Well, it's just hard to like judge it because certain countries will handle the pandemic better than others. So like, let's say, even for the major, like let's say like America handles the coronavirus really, really well, but then maybe Brazil doesn't, then it's like you still can't travel to Brazil even if you're out and about in your country in like Germany or whatever country you're thinking about. So even then it's still event location is going to like, I think land, like you could maybe do like lands with no crowd again, and depending on the country, if people are willing to risk it like sooner than people think. But I think it's country dependent on like how quickly like events come back.
I think also on that, like certain countries are going to have restrictions as well. They're going to say, hey, you can't travel, or if you do travel, you're stuck when you come back for 2. Like we're going to have a lot of shit changing, right? And that stuff we can only wait and see. One thing's for certain, there's going to be a lot of fuckery by the time we make it to November. That's for sure. So we have 3 of these events. We obviously got the ESL one. We don't know which one is in summer, and we don't know what it's going to be in fall. But assuming the way that Valve tend to operate, they won't just give everything to the same TO. So that's going to be a curious one to look on for there. And then in terms of online CS, I guess everybody has to go in the same way, right? Everybody is going to have to turn all of their events online or just cancel them. We've already covered that, bits and pieces there. I think all we're left to do before we close down the show, well, we got Road to Rio predictions here. So what we'll do is maybe we'll just get Daps' opinion, because I think we'll do another one before we start Road to Rio. Maybe what's today's Saturday? I start work on Wednesday. Maybe we won't.
It's 4 days away from at least in the 2 main regions.
Yeah, maybe we will, maybe we won't. I don't know. Everything's probably up in the air right now. But
I have some questions from Instagram if we want to do that.
Oh yeah, fuck the predictions. I don't even like doing predictions.
I mean, it's gonna take 3 weeks anyway. We're gonna have time.
Yeah.
So
all right. Well, let's hit me with a few of these questions. Whack over the play time.
There's a question: what does Gen.G need to become a top 10 team? We have Yumpy to Ants rumor.
That's not gonna
other
happen.
Questions. Did you have problems with Tarik in the NRG roster to daps?
Daps, you can pick any of these questions that Prof's saying, and that'll be the final question of the show. Just keep going, Prof.
Okay. I mean, I can just answer those. That makes it easy.
Yeah, hit it.
I'd say for our team, we just need to like become more consistent in remembering things we've already went over. I think a big problem we're running into is we're forgetting a lot of things we covered, and then we try and add new things, and then we forget like some basic stuff we went over, and then it just kind of creates like more problems come up, and then we have to keep reverting back to like trying to remember the original stuff we went over. How do you
actually solve that issue? Like, because obviously not the same level, but my coaching with this local creation team, that was a thing. That was such a big issue, and we'd have to do like literally before every map. Okay, let's remember things. Don't do this on an anti-eco. Don't do this. Like, but that also takes so much time and effort to do before every fucking scrim or official. So how do you think that can be developed? Is it just about the players developing themselves?
I think it's a lot on like individual players remembering what to do, because if I come in to practice every day and our main focus is just what we went over 2 months ago, then we're not really like advancing anywhere. We're just sort of staying the same and like reiterating. I mean, it's good to like go over points again and like enforce good concepts, but it's hard to like advance your game if you're constantly having to go back and like correct old mistakes or like remember old strats that like people should just remember, essentially. And what were the other two questions about ends to jump? I don't know anything about ends, to be honest.
Yeah, there was a question about and then having issues with tarik.
I mean, like,
how much do you hate tarik and why?
I mean, like, personally, I didn't really like hate tarik like out of the game. I mean, like, with tarik, it's just sort of like I feel like he gave up on me too fast. Like, I knew really early on he wanted to replace me, like within the first month probably, and we didn't even like get like we didn't even get like not a top 4 finish. Like, our results weren't bad, we just weren't winning. Like, I think tarik, yeah, I just think he doesn't really have faith in me, and there wasn't really, the only thing I really didn't like was just there wasn't a lot of like, there wasn't like a hey daps like you could do, there wasn't like conversations about like what I could do better or like how to improve me as a player individually. Like,
but he's a snake, basically, like, is what you're saying.
Whoa, come on, Striker, you can't be throwing that around, man. Careful,
I mean, like it's partly on other people too in the team, right? Because like not like near the very end, there was a thing where like people tried to like, or there was a thing where it's like, let's just have like tarik IGL and you can focus more on like your individual self.
That's it.
Nearly
because that's
near like the
strength.
Near the very end of the team that happened, but like it should have just happened. Like, not that should have happened, but like months and months ago should have just been like, hey, like I think you're struggling on X map. Like, you could like maybe do this instead, or like here's like how to improve yourself. Like, there wasn't a lot. Like, that's one thing that I like about Tim, at least, is like I do have my own problems, and Tim at least like talks to me about them and like tries to help me with them in areas that I'm weaker in. Whereas on NRG, it was just sort of like, this was the team I was on for almost 3 years, and then I just kind of get cut without too much like work being done on myself, which is the only sort of like thing I'd really disliked about it. But I sort of knew it was going to happen. Like, I knew picking up tarik, I was going to get cut eventually. Like, we just
that's an interesting.
We had no one else to pick up, and all the other people we wanted to pick up like either said no or they couldn't do it at the time. And yeah, it just sort of happened. Like, I knew that like the only way I was going to stay on that team is if we just like won most events. So that's sort of, I mean, it's just, even our manager said it. Our manager said it before we even made the change to replace Fugly. Was like, if you get, if this happens, like, you know what's going to happen down the road or whatever. So
okay.
Well, the thing is,
insight.
the thing, have you structured this team differently so that, like, obviously that's a personnel issue, right? In the sense of certain people just don't get along, or certain people see a game a certain way. But do you think that Counter-Strike, obviously in the way that things, let's just use Astralis as the example, Zonic calls all the shots in that regard, right? For you, I would say that you and Stan are probably still of that older generation of in-game leaders, even though you're only 25, 26, whatever the fuck you are. But in the sense of like, it's your team and like you call the shots, right? Like you don't want anybody stepping on your toes. You probably have a good relationship with the coach and whoever helps you out in the server a bit with all that kind of shit, but it's still like your team. You wouldn't say this is ImAPet's team. This is daps' team, right?
I'd say it depends.
Okay.
I'd say on like NRG, it was definitely like, it just depends on like how much coaches are used, right? Like some IGLs don't really like to listen to their coaches as much, and their coaches are more there just for like backup support. And then other coaches are given more freedom, and they're allowed to like build the team with the person. I would say on NRG, it was definitely like, I tried to make it as much of like a team effort as possible. Like everyone had their ideas, and like we implemented like everything. Like there was one point on NRG where we literally tried like pretty much every strat possible. Like we watched, like Chet watched every team, and we took everything and we just saw what worked and what didn't, and we like changed parts of strats and made them like more adaptable to like how we like to play. And then at that point we just needed to play well and like perform at that point, because we had like tried pretty much everything. So I'd say it just depends. Like I know there's IGLs that don't use their coaches really, and they're just there as like moral support. And then there's coaches that have way more say, and they can even make like roster changes if they want. And so it varies.
What type of coach are you going to be when you eventually hang up the mouse and retire? Are you gonna say it's my way or the highway, motherfuckers?
I'd say it would. If I did coach, it would depend on the team I'm joining.
Okay.
Like if I coached like Liquid,
I want you to go in there, daps. I want you to fuck some shit up. I want you to go in and go, you're fucking cut. You're doing bots. You're practicing. You fuck. That's the type of coach I want, daps. I want you to walk in the room, kick down a door when we're allowed back in the same room, and tell them what to do.
It depends. Like if I coach a team like Liquid, then it's way different, right? Like it's way different coaching people who.
Well, then you're worrying about emotions if you're coaching Liquid.
I mean, I don't know anything. I don't know what's going on with Liquid, but
you and Naf are friends. You and Naf are friends. You know what's going on.
Like the laugh and is like, I don't know what's going on in Liquid. Is literally he knows everything, but he can't say. That is literally what he's saying, right?
I mean, they just want. I mean, I don't think Liquid has as many problems as people think. But it's just like teams. Every team has problems, and then if you're winning, the problems are less important. That's just how it always is.
Well, the problem with Liquid is pretty much that they just can't beat Astralis consistently, right? And that means they can't win events for a long time. So that's basically the only problem that they have. It's not like that they're mega inconsistent or like bad and consistently or anything like that. They just run into Astralis and lose. That's basically their problem.
Yeah, and I think that situation's always been confusing to me, because I've always thought, like, Liquid definitely is better individual skill, I'd say. I don't think anyone could argue that. Yeah. I'd say versus Astralis, like, Liquid pound for pound wins in most, like, areas, but there's just, like, a mental hurdle, I guess, or they just...
it's also
maybe they
don't,
don't...
I think.
Yeah, maybe they don't innovate enough for that matchup, or, like, try, like, weirder thing. Like, I'm not sure what it is. But yeah, I definitely think with the amount they've lost to Astralis, it doesn't make sense for the players Liquid has. It's definitely some sort of style. Yeah, I agree. It's like a stylistic thing. Like Astralis is either just super comfortable versus them, or Liquid has a mental block versus them, or something like that.
Okay.
I mean, it's hard not to have a mental block when you've lost something like 30 maps to the team over the past 2 years.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
All right, boys. It's 8 p.m. here. It's probably about 6 a.m. where Daps is right now. We've done 2 hours. We've done some questions. We've had a good time. We've learned a little about North American Counter-Strike. Daps, do you need to say anything? Do you need to like do a shout out to like more labs or any of your sponsors or anything like that?
You just did. So
yeah,
there we go.
That's the thing. I do the research. I do the research so I can shout out to the sponsors. Is there anything you want to say to the people at home, or anybody, anyone for that matter?
Stay safe, everybody.
All right, guys. Wash your hands. You heard Daps. Stay safe. We're going to get through it. Everything's going to be fine. We're going to be back for another episode at some time soon. I think I'm working like 6 days a week, and then I have like every Monday off or something. I don't know. So we'll try and fit some podcasts in around then. If not, I'm sure they'll get some replacements for me at some point. Prof and Striker, Thank you for joining us yet again. Episode 16 in the bag. Lucas, you didn't fuck anything up this time. That's great stuff.
Amazing.
And guys, you know, occasionally when we finish these episodes, I say like call your mom or be nice to people, do this kind of stuff. But seriously, in a time when shit's fucked up for everybody and shit's fucked up for some people worse than it is for others, and that's always going to be the case. That's kind of just the way the world works. Some of us are born with the shit end of the stick. But just be nicer to people because you're not going to be seeing too many of them. And when you get the opportunity to do so, you know, whether you're talking to them or you have a call or, you know, you need to pay that credit card bill and you're having issues logging in online because the times are in Australia and that means you have to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. If you're having issues, just be nice to people because pushing those negative vibes around, you carry that shit with you, guys. And it makes you sad. And I don't want anyone to be sad. I'm going to go play some Counter-Strike and get angry, but not sad. So good night.